The night was silent. Too silent for a world that once glowed with life. A cold wind moved through the broken trees outside the old human cabin. Inside, a single lamp flickered on a wooden table, throwing long shadows across the floor. Ethan sat near the window, his rifle resting against the wall. He had lived alone for years, far from the colonies, far from war. Then came the knock. Soft at first, then desperate. 3 small knocks, uneven, weak. Ethan froze, his heart thumping. Nobody ever came here, not humans, not traitors, not anyone. He stood, hand on the rifle, and walked to the door. When he opened it, cold air rushed in, carrying a smell of smoke and fear. Standing there was a small alien girl, no older than 10, with silver skin and bright amber eyes. Her clothes were torn, her hands trembling. Blood streaked one side of her face. She looked up at him and whispered, her voice shaking, "Help me, human. My parents were slain today. Can I stay here?" Ethan stared, speechless. Her eyes were wide, not just with fear, but deep sadness. He could see she was exhausted, maybe from running for hours. He glanced into the darkness behind her, expecting to see shadows moving. There was nothing, only the whisper of the forest and the sound of her quiet sobs. He knelt down slowly. "Who did this?" he asked in a low voice. She looked at him, tears falling down her cheeks. "They came. The hunters. They killed everyone and I ran. They'll come here too," she said. Her words hit him like a hammer. He had heard of these hunters before, mercenaries who raided alien villages near the border, selling survivors as slaves. But he never thought they would come this deep into human land. He looked around once more, then made a quick choice. "Get inside," he said firmly, pulling her in and closing the door behind her. She stumbled in, shivering, clutching a small pendant around her neck. Ethan locked the door, dropped the heavy wooden beam, and pulled the curtains. His cabin suddenly felt smaller, darker. The little alien girl sat near the fire, hugging her knees. Her name, he later learned, was Lyra. Ethan gave her a blanket and some water. She drank it like someone who hadn't had a sip in days. He watched her quietly, his mind racing. He had promised himself never to get involved again, never to save anyone. But now here she was, a scared child from another world, begging for help. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice low. "They will come for me," she said. "They never stop." "Never forgive," Ethan frowned. "How many?" 5 ships, she whispered. "They burned everything. I hid under the stones. I heard them laughing." Her body shook with the memory. Ethan moved to the window again. Peeking through a small crack, the forest was still dark, but he noticed faint lights far in the distance, moving. Glowing red, he cursed under his breath. They were coming. He turned back to Lyra. "You can't stay out in the open," he said. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Then where?" He thought fast, his soldier's instincts waking after years of silence. "There's a trapdoor beneath the floorboards. Go now," he said, pulling the rug aside. He lifted a wooden hatch and motioned her in. Her eyes widened. "Will you be safe?" Ethan forced a small smile. "Don't worry about me, kid. Just hide." She hesitated, clutching his sleeve for a moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're the first human who didn't run from me." Her words hit deep, but Ethan didn't reply. He helped her climb down, then closed the hatch and covered it again. Outside, the forest came alive with engines and voices. Bright beams of red light cut through the night. Searching, Ethan's hand tightened around his rifle. He whispered under his breath, "Hide. They're coming for you." The sound of footsteps echoed closer. A metallic voice shouted, "We know she's here, human. Give her up, and we'll let you live." Ethan exhaled slowly, eyes hardening. He blew out the lamp, and darkness filled the room. The old soldier was back, and this time he wasn't running. The night grew louder, filled with the hum of engines and the crunch of boots over frozen leaves. Ethan crouched near the window, his breath calm but steady. Outside, 3 red searchlights scanned through the trees. Cutting the darkness like blades, he could hear voices, rough, mechanical, mixed with laughter. The hunters had come, and they were close. Ethan pressed his back to the wall, counting the sounds. He could tell there were at least 6 of them, maybe more. Their heavy steps moved toward the cabin. Slow, confident. He reached under the table, pulling out a small old device, a signal jammer he had built years ago. He switched it on. The lights flickered once, then steadied again. "All right," he whispered. "Let's see if I still remember how to fight." Beneath the floor, Lyra trembled in the darkness. She held her breath. Clutching her pendant tight, It was all she had left of her parents, a small crystal that glowed faintly in her hands. She could hear them above, Ethan moving carefully, the distant growl of the hunter's ship engines. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they could hear it. Outside, a deep voice shouted, "Human inside!"
"Step out with your hands up!"
Ethan didn't move. He stayed behind the window frame, eyes locked on their shadows. Another voice, colder, replied, "Scan the cabin." The girl's biosignature was last tracked here. A red beam swept across the cabin. Flashing over the wooden walls, Ethan ducked low and pulled the curtain tighter. He could see one of them, tall, armored, with glowing blue eyes behind a mask. Their rifles buzzed with electric current, weapons made for both alien and human prey. The leader stepped closer to the door. He slammed a heavy boot against it. "Open up, old man." "You don't want trouble," Ethan said nothing. His rifle ready, finger near the trigger. The old wood creaked under pressure. They were about to break it down, then Ethan acted. He threw a flash pellet across the room, hitting the door right as they kicked it open. A blinding white light burst outward, followed by smoke. The hunters staggered, shouting. Ethan fired twice, controlled, precise. 2 red suits fell before the others could react. "Contact! Humans armed!" someone yelled. Ethan moved fast, rolling behind a table and reloading. Bullets of energy cut through the walls, lighting the inside of the cabin. Wood splintered, furniture caught fire, but Ethan kept shooting, his movements sharp and silent like a ghost. Under the floor, Lyra covered her ears, tears rolling down her cheeks. She wanted to scream, to help, but she couldn't. Every sound above her made her heart ache. The man who had saved her was risking his life for her. Why? She thought, why would a human protect me? Outside, the hunters regrouped, dragging their fallen. The leader barked orders, "Set fire to the cabin. We'll smoke them out." Flames began to spread along the outer walls. Ethan coughed, smoke filling his lungs. He looked around quickly, searching for a way out. Then his eyes fell on the old hatch, the one where Lyra hid. He moved to it and whispered through the cracks, "Stay quiet. No matter what happens, don't come out." Lyra whispered back, trembling. "You'll die if you stay." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've faced worse." He grabbed his old combat knife, slung the rifle over his shoulder, and kicked open the back wall. The hunters didn't expect it. He burst out into the cold night air. Rolling behind a burned-out vehicle, he fired again. Hitting 2 more before diving into the trees, the leader roared. After him, the chase began through the forest. Lights flashing, smoke rising. Ethan knew these woods better than anyone. He used the darkness like an ally. He laid small traps, tripped a few sensors, slowed them down, but he was bleeding from his shoulder now. One of their energy rounds had grazed him, burning deep. Still, he kept running until the cabin was out of sight. Then he crouched behind a fallen tree, gasping. He pulled a small comm device from his pocket, one that hadn't been used in years. He turned it on, static crackled. "Command outpost. This is Sergeant Ethan Hale, civilian life form under protection. Requesting extraction." Silence. Then a faint voice replied, "Ethan, you're supposed to be dead." He exhaled, a small smile crossing his face. "Yeah," he said. "Tell the ghosts to make room for one more." Far behind, the cabin burned, flames rising against the night. Lyra stayed hidden, eyes full of tears and hope. She whispered to herself, "Please come back, human." The forest had gone quiet again, but it was not peace. It was the silence before another storm. Ethan crouched low behind a ridge, his shoulder bleeding through his torn jacket. Smoke from the burning cabin drifted upward, glowing orange against the night sky. He could still hear faint screams from the hunters' comms. Angry and confused, they had lost some of their own, but they would return. Stronger, angrier, and ready to kill. Ethan pressed a bandage against his wound. Gritting his teeth, he checked his rifle. Half a magazine left. 2 smoke pellets and 1 last flash charge. Not much, but enough to buy time. He knew he couldn't fight them all, not for long, but he had to make sure Lyra stayed safe no matter what. He touched the small comm device again. The voice on the other end crackled with static. "Ethan, are you sure it's a civilian? Alien child? You know what that means, right?" Ethan's voice was steady, cold. "She's a kid. That's all that matters. I'm requesting immediate evac from Zone 12. Silence followed, then a sigh. "Copy that, Sergeant. But this sector is under hunter control. Extraction will take time. Stay hidden until we reach you." Ethan closed the comm and leaned back. Time, that's what he didn't have. He looked toward the cabin, its fire dying into black smoke. Beneath those ashes, somewhere safe, was a small girl who had already lost everything. He couldn't fail her too, meanwhile. Under the broken floorboards, Lyra sat in total darkness, her lungs filled with the heavy scent of smoke and dust. Every sound made her jump, the groan of burning wood, the echo of footsteps outside. She held her glowing pendant close, whispering in her own language, a small prayer, one her mother used to say before sleep. Stars above guide the lost. Protect the brave. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Mixing with ash, suddenly, something shifted above. A heavy boot slammed down, breaking part of the floor. Light poured through the cracks. She froze, holding her breath. A hunter's mask leaned close, blue light scanning through the smoke. Heat signature found, the voice growled. Her heart stopped, then, out of nowhere, a gunshot rang. The hunter fell, smoke rising from his armor. Ethan was there, covered in ash and blood, rifle raised. He had come back. He kicked the hatch open, reached down and pulled Lyra out. Her small body trembled as she clung to him. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes scanning her quickly. She shook her head, whispering, "You came back?" He nodded. "I said I would." They ran through the back of the ruined cabin. Moving between the trees, the night was filled with red light again, drones circling overhead. Scanning the ground, Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her behind a thick rock formation. He covered her mouth gently, whispering, "Quiet, they're searching." The ground shook as one of the ships hovered closer. The light passed just inches from them. Lyra's pendant glowed faintly. Ethan frowned and covered it with his hand. "Turn that off," he hissed softly. She looked scared. "I can't. It's part of me." He cursed under his breath but didn't let go. The drones moved away, but he knew it wouldn't last. "We have to reach the old bunker," he muttered. Lyra blinked. "What bunker?" Ethan looked toward the north ridge, eyes narrowing. "It's where humans used to hide during the First War. It still has power, maybe even weapons." They began moving again, slowly and quietly. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound was a possible threat. Lyra stumbled once, her bare feet bleeding on sharp stones. Ethan stopped and lifted her in his arms. She was light as air, fragile. "You're safe now," he whispered. Though he wasn't sure if that was true, behind them, a hunter commander spoke through the comms, his voice echoing through the forest. "Human soldier, we know who you are. Give up the alien child. You can't save her. You'll die for nothing." Ethan stopped, his jaw tightening. He raised his head and shouted back into the darkness, "I've died before. You just don't remember it." For a brief moment, silence returned. Then the forest exploded with sound again. Energy blasts cut through trees. Drones dove down, firing streams of light. Ethan rolled behind a log, shielding Lyra with his body. The air burned with heat and smoke. He fired back, hitting one drone clean out of the sky. Lyra looked up, tears in her eyes. "Why do you help me? I'm not even human," she said through the chaos. Ethan reloaded, his voice firm but calm. "Because you cried the same way my daughter once did." The words hit her heart like lightning. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. Ethan fired again, shouting, "Now run!" They dashed through the trees as the night sky filled with fire. Two figures, one human, one alien child, running together through death and smoke, neither knowing if they'd make it till morning, but refusing to give up. The forest grew darker the farther they went. Ethan's boots sank into the mud, his breath short, his shoulder wound throbbing. He kept one arm around Lyra, guiding her through the shadows. They followed the old stream that once led soldiers to the northern ridge during the human wars. Now it was overgrown, hidden, forgotten, just like him. At last, he saw it, an old bunker half buried in the earth. Its metal door was rusted, vines curling over it like claws. He pressed his hand against a scanner. A faint blue light blinked, then flickered weakly. The system still worked. Though barely, the door groaned open, releasing a wave of stale air inside, Ethan said softly. Lyra hesitated, her eyes wide. "It smells like death." He nodded grimly. "It used to be a shelter during war. Many never made it out." She stepped in, her small hand clutching his jacket. The sound of the door closing behind them echoed like thunder. Inside, the bunker was dark and cold. Ethan turned on an old power cell, and faint lights hummed to life. Dust danced in the air like tiny stars. Metal bunks, broken screens, and empty cans told stories of those who once lived here. Lyra walked quietly, touching the walls. "It feels sad," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "It remembers." He moved to the old console and typed in commands. Static filled the room, then a flicker of a voice. "Command base Delta. Offline. Last signal 12 years ago." He shut it off and sighed. "No help here," he muttered. "But maybe protection." Lyra sat on a small bench. Hugging her knees, she watched him wrap his wound with cloth. His hands rough but careful. "You were a soldier?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Long ago. Before the peace broke again." She tilted her head. "Did you lose your family too?" Ethan froze for a second, his eyes dark. "My wife, and my little girl. They didn't survive the last attack." Lyra looked down. Whispering, "I'm sorry." He smiled faintly. "You sound just like her when you say that." For a moment, silence filled the bunker. Gentle, heavy, painful. Then the ground trembled again. Faint but growing stronger, Ethan's head snapped up. "They found us," he said sharply. He rushed to the control panel. Scanning the sensors, 4 signals approaching fast. Heavily armed, he turned to Lyra. "There's a back exit. You'll take it and run north to the cliffs. Understand?" She shook her head. "No. You'll be alone." He knelt in front of her, eyes steady. "I've been alone for years. You just made me remember what it means to care again. That's enough." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She held up her pendant, its glow pulsing softly. "My mother said it could show the way to those with brave hearts." She pressed it into his hand. "It will guide you too." Ethan shook his head. "Keep it. You'll need it." But she didn't move her hand away. "Please," she whispered. "You gave me hope. Now take light." He sighed, closing his fingers around it. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder, closer. He turned toward the door and raised his rifle. "Hide behind the crates. No sound until I say." Lyra obeyed, crawling behind the broken metal shelves. Her heart pounded as she watched him take position by the entrance. The first blast hit the door, metal screeched. Sparks flew, then came the second, louder, harder. The door burst open, and smoke filled the room. 4 hunters stepped in, red eyes scanning, weapons ready. Ethan waited until they were inside, then threw his last flash charge. The bunker exploded with white light. He moved like lightning, firing quick and clean. 2 fell instantly, another stumbled. The 4th turned and fired, hitting Ethan in the side. He fell back gasping, but kept shooting. The last hunter dropped with a heavy thud. Smoke filled the air again. Lyra crawled out, crying, "Ethan, Ethan!" He sat against the wall, blood running down his arm. "I told you to hide," he said weakly. "You're hurt," she said, pressing her hands over his wound. Her pendant glowed brighter. Spreading warm light through the bunker, Ethan blinked, feeling something strange, his pain easing slightly. The crystal pulsed, humming softly. "What's happening?" he whispered. Lyra looked at him, her tears glowing like stars. "It's my people's gift. It shares life." Ethan shook his head. "No, don't waste it on me." But she smiled faintly. "You didn't waste your life on me." Outside, the forest burned with the red light of more ships arriving. Ethan forced himself up, rifle shaking in his grip. "They'll send more," he said. Lyra stood beside him, her pendant glowing brighter now. "Then we face them together," she said softly. Ethan looked down at her and smiled for the first time in years. "All right, kid," he said, loading his last clip. "Let's show them what human really means." The sky began to change color as the first light of dawn crept over the mountains. Ethan could see his breath in the cold air as he stood near the cracked doorway of the bunker. Smoke rose in slow twisting ribbons carrying the smell of burnt metal and blood. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked down at Lyra. She sat quietly near the control console, her glowing pendant now dim, its energy nearly gone. He could see how tired she was, eyes red from tears, voice soft from crying. She had seen too much for a child, and yet she hadn't broken. Something inside her still shone like a small, brave flame. Ethan walked over, crouching beside her. "You did good back there," he said quietly. Lyra looked up. "You got hurt because of me." He shook his head. "I got hurt because I didn't aim fast enough." She almost smiled, a tiny, sad smile, but the sound of engines outside erased it. Ethan's expression hardened again. He moved to the window slit, peering through. 6 hunter ships had landed near the clearing, their metal hulls black and red like burning iron. Figures poured out, More soldiers, drones, heavy weapons. It was an army. Not a squad, Lyra gasped. They found us again. Ethan nodded, loading his rifle. We can't fight them head on. He looked at the faint lights blinking on the wall. Old defense systems almost dead, but maybe, just maybe, they still had one spark left. He moved to the main console, pressing the power relays. The old screens flickered to life, codes flashing red. He grinned faintly. Come on, old friend. Wake up. The bunker groaned as buried turrets unfolded from the ground outside. Ancient, rusted machines came alive, humming with weak energy. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a distraction. Lyra, he said, when I tell you, you run through the tunnel behind the generator. Follow the stream north until you see blue rocks. That's where the rescue will come. She stared at him, eyes wide. And you? I'll make sure they don't follow. Her voice cracked. No, you can't. He placed a finger on her lips gently. I've been waiting a long time for a reason to fight again. Don't take that from me. The ground shook as the first blast hit the outside wall. Ethan grabbed his rifle and took position near the door. Go! He shouted as the second blast echoed through the bunker. Lyra hesitated for only a second before she turned and ran down the narrow tunnel. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, Please live, human. Please live, back at the entrance. Ethan pulled a heavy lever, activating the defense grid. Turrets outside began to fire, bright flashes lighting the forest. The hunters screamed and scattered as old human firepower came to life again. Ethan fired from the doorway, his shots sharp and precise. He moved like a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. One hunter tried to flank him, but Ethan caught him mid-step with a clean shot. Another charged in with a blade. Ethan swung his rifle like a club, knocking him down. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the bunker, and through it all, he could hear faint whispers. Ghostly echoes of old soldiers who had died here long ago. It was as if the bunker itself was remembering war, remembering its purpose, but even ghosts couldn't hold forever. The defense system sparked, failing one by one. The turrets outside went silent. Smoke rising from their broken shells. Ethan fell to one knee. Breathing hard, he was out of ammo, out of strength. Yet when the hunter leader stepped through the smoke, Ethan still raised his weapon. Even empty, his stance was unbroken. The leader's voice was sharp and cruel. You humans never learn. You protect things that mean nothing. She is property, an experiment gone wrong. Ethan spat blood and glared at him. She's a child, and that makes her more than you'll ever be. The hunter raised his weapon to fire. But before he could pull the trigger, a bright light burst through the ceiling. A human dropship descended, engines roaring. Blinding light cutting through the smoke. Ethan shielded his eyes as human soldiers dropped down, their armor shining blue. Sergeant Hale! A voice shouted. We got your signal. The hunter turned to fire, but a blast hit him straight in the chest. He fell back with a scream. Armor cracking. Ethan slumped to the ground, his strength fading. He could barely hear the voices now. All clear. We've got him. Get med support. Somewhere far down the tunnel, Lyra heard the sounds of explosions and light. She turned back once, tears on her face. Her pendant flickered weakly in her hand. Please, human, don't die, she whispered, clutching it tight, as soldiers lifted Ethan's body from the rubble. The rising sun painted the bunker walls with gold. The long night was over, but the fight was not. The world was silent again. Only the soft beeping of machines filled the air. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the bright white lights above him. He was no longer in the forest or the bunker. He was inside a medical bay, clean and quiet. His arm was wrapped in bandages, and his chest was covered with wires and small glowing sensors. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then it all came back, the fire, the fight, the little alien girl. He sat up too fast, pain shooting through his ribs. A nurse hurried over, pressing a hand on his shoulder. Easy, sir. You're safe now, she said gently. Where's the girl? Ethan asked quickly. The alien child? The nurse hesitated. She was found near the river. She's alive, but weak. She's been asking for you. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. He swung his legs off the bed despite the pain. I need to see her, he said. The nurse shook her head. You need rest. I've rested enough, he interrupted. His voice steady. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, room 12. But just for a minute. He walked slowly down the bright hallway, each step heavy, his body hurt. but his heart felt lighter. When he reached the room, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Lyra lay on a small bed, her silver skin pale, her pendant glowing faintly beside her. She turned her head at the sound of his steps. "Ethan," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. He smiled softly, sitting beside her. "You made it, kid." She reached for his hand, her small fingers trembling. "I thought you were gone," she said. He squeezed her hand gently. "Almost. But I don't break that easy." She smiled weakly. "You said the rescue would come." "You were right," he chuckled. "Sometimes. Even I get lucky." For a while they sat in silence. Ethan looked at the pendant glowing beside her. "That crystal of yours," he said, "it saved me, didn't it?" She nodded slowly. "It gives back what was freely given. You gave me life that night, so it gave you some of mine." He looked at her surprised. "You mean you shared your energy with me?" She smiled faintly. "My people call it the gift of the heart." He shook his head, half smiling, half amazed. "Guess I owe you one." Then, but their peace didn't last long. The door opened again, and two officers entered, a man and a woman, both wearing dark uniforms. The man spoke first, his tone sharp. "Sergeant Ethan Hale, you were ordered to remain retired, yet you engaged in combat and interfered with a classified operation." Ethan frowned. Operation? Those hunters were murdering civilians. There was no operation. The officer's eyes were cold. Those civilians were part of an experiment, non-sanctioned hybrids. That child shouldn't even exist. Lyra's eyes widened. Fear flashing across her face, Ethan stood slowly, pain forgotten. "Say that again," he said quietly. The officer continued. "She's the last of her kind, and she carries genetic data that could compromise both human and alien treaties. She must be taken to a secure lab for analysis." Ethan clenched his fists. "You mean you're taking her to be dissected?" he said. His voice rising, the woman officer stepped forward. "It's not your concern, Sergeant. She's not yours to protect." Ethan's voice turned cold. "She asked for help. That makes her mine to protect." For a moment the room went silent. Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes, her lips trembling. "Ethan," she whispered. "Please." He turned to her and smiled, his tone soft again. "I promised I'd keep you safe." "I meant it." The officers exchanged glances. The man spoke again. "If you interfere, you'll be arrested. You'll lose your rank, your pension, everything." Ethan's eyes didn't waver. "I already lost everything once. You can't take what's already gone." He turned back to Lyra, whispering, "When I say run, you go to the docks. There's a cargo shuttle leaving in 10 minutes. Hide in the storage bay. I'll find you." Her eyes filled with tears. "But—" He squeezed her hand gently. "Trust me." Before the officers could react, Ethan moved, fast and silent. He grabbed the medical tray, flipping it into their faces. The lights flickered as alarms blared. He pulled Lyra into his arms and rushed into the hall. Security lights flashed red, voices shouting behind them. "Stop him. Containment breach." They ran through the corridors, past stunned doctors and soldiers. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't slow down. Lyra held onto him tightly, whispering, "I'm scared." He smiled faintly, even while running. "Good. Fear keeps you alive." They reached the hangar bay, the sound of engines roaring louder now. The dawn light spilled across the floor as the massive cargo ship prepared to launch. Ethan crouched beside a crate. Catching his breath, "All right," he said. "Your turn to be brave again." Lyra looked up at him, eyes shining with trust and sadness. "What about you?" He smiled sadly. "I'll be right behind you. Always." She hugged him tight one last time, then slipped into the cargo bay, disappearing among the crates. Ethan turned back toward the hall where soldiers were rushing in. He raised his hands, his voice calm. "She's gone. Don't bother chasing." The soldiers surrounded him, weapons raised, but he just smiled as the ship engines roared to life. High above, the cargo vessel lifted into the morning sky, carrying with it the last light of a world he thought he'd lost, a light that refused to die. The cargo ship cut through the clouds, leaving the burning world far below. Lyra sat hidden between metal crates, clutching her fading pendant. Its once bright light was dim now, like a dying star, but she kept it close to her heart, whispering softly, "Please be alive, human, please." The engines roared louder as the ship climbed higher into orbit. Outside the small porthole, the world turned into a blue and white sphere. It was beautiful, but it wasn't home. Her home was gone, burned by the hunters, and now the only person she had left was far behind. Down below in the military base, Ethan sat in a metal cell. His hands were cuffed, his body bruised, but his eyes were calm. He knew Lyra had escaped. That was enough. The guards passed by, whispering his name like it belonged to a ghost. Sergeant Hale, hero of Delta Front, now a criminal, one said, shaking his head. Ethan smiled faintly. Heroes always make someone angry, he muttered. A door hissed open and a woman in a dark coat stepped inside. She wasn't a soldier. Her face was too calm, too curious. Ethan Hale, she said. Her voice even. You caused quite a mess. 6 officers injured. 1 lab destroyed. All for an alien child. Ethan looked up slowly. Her name's Lyra, he said coldly. The woman tilted her head. You know she carries data that could change everything. That pendant of hers is more than decoration. It's alive, part technology, part soul matrix. You protected a miracle. Ethan leaned forward. Then protect her. Don't use her. The woman smiled slightly. Maybe I will. Maybe I already am. She placed a small data chip on the table and stood. For now, you're officially declared missing in action. Your cell will be empty in 10 minutes. Don't waste it. Then she turned and left, her boots echoing down the hall. Ethan stared at the chip, his heart racing. He picked it up and pressed it against the scanner near the door. The lock light blinked green. Freedom again, he stepped out quietly, moving through the corridors like a shadow. Somewhere deep inside he felt it, the strange, warm pull of the pendant as if it still connected them. Meanwhile, on the ship, Lyra felt the same warmth. Her pendant flickered back to life, glowing brighter for the first time since takeoff. She gasped, her small hands trembling. He's alive, she whispered, tears of relief filling her eyes outside the window. The stars began to stretch as the ship jumped into warp speed. But before she could rest, a deep voice spoke from the darkness of the cargo hold. Well, well, what do we have here? Lyra froze, turning slowly. A hunter soldier stepped from the shadows. His armor cracked, but still deadly. He must have sneaked aboard during the chaos. Her heart pounded. Stay back, she said. Clutching her pendant, the hunter laughed cruelly. That little trinket won't save you this time. Just then, the ship shook violently. An emergency dock had been forced open. A figure in a dark jacket stepped in through the hatch, smoke swirling around him. Guess again, Ethan said, his voice rough but steady. Lyra's eyes widened. Ethan! He raised his weapon, firing once. The hunter stumbled back. Roaring in pain, Ethan moved fast, slamming his knee into the alien's chest, throwing him into a metal crate. With one last punch, the hunter went down, unmoving. Ethan turned to Lyra, breathing hard. You didn't think I'd let you fly away alone, did you? She ran to him and hugged him tight, her tears wetting his jacket. I thought you were dead, she said. He smiled softly. Dead men don't climb ships. They sat together for a long moment, the hum of the engines steady around them. Lyra looked up at him, her pendant glowing brighter again. Where will we go now? She asked. Ethan looked out the window at the endless stars. Somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere quiet, maybe. Somewhere we can start again. Lyra tilted her head. Start again? He nodded. Yeah, a home, you me. Maybe others who need one. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. You sound like my father, she whispered. Ethan chuckled softly. Maybe I'm just an old fool who needed a reason to live again. The ship passed through a field of bright nebula clouds. Light painted their faces in gold and silver. Ethan closed his eyes, the pain in his body fading, replaced by peace. Lyra's pendant shone so brightly now that the whole cabin glowed with it. A warmth filled the air, a living promise that no matter what happened, they'd never be alone again. Somewhere far ahead, a new world waited. Green fields, blue skies, and silence unbroken by war. Lyra smiled as the stars drifted by, whispering softly, Thank you, human, for saving me. Ethan smiled too, watching the horizon. No, he said quietly. You saved me. And as the ship vanished into the light of dawn among the stars, 2 souls, 1 human, 1 alien, finally found their home in each other's courage. The war was far behind, but their story had just begun.